man who believes in free speech is now celebrating the cancellation. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel's show has been indefinitely postponed, of someone who arguably was exercising his right to free speech.
Let me just ask you, James, about Gaza, because you talked about Ukraine and perhaps a really long road to any substantial change. We didn't get any sort of sense in terms of Gaza policy from the American president. He was asked the question directly in terms of saying to Benjamin Netanyahu, it is time to stop. If not now, then when, was the question that Robert Peston put to him.
Yeah, and he didn't really answer it in terms of, you know, and he sort of hinted that if the hostages were released, then maybe he might sort of have some thoughts about putting some pressure on the Israelis. But all the indications are not at the moment. Secretary of State Rubio was in the region recently, and he, you know, prayed at the Western Wall with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the Americans have been very, very explicit in their hostility to the decision by the British government imminently to recognise the State of Palestine, along with various other European countries, members of the G7 for the first time. The American argument is that this rewards Hamas terrorism. Again, an argument rejected by the British government. And they also say that it might encourage Israel to go further and potentially annex parts of the West Bank. The British response to that is, as we heard from the Prime Minister, look, you know, Hamas is an evil terrorist organisation, they say, and it is not going to be part of, and should not be part of any future governance of any part of Gaza. But the issue is this. At the moment, we have an Israeli government that is fundamentally opposed to the idea of the Palestinians ever having their own state. The British government says that is wrong, that it believes that there should ultimately, someday in the future, be a Palestinian state. And because of the hostility to that idea by the current Netanyahu government, and that's how they refer it. They don't talk about the people of Israel, they talk about the Netanyahu government, because it's very associated with the Prime Minister. They say the reason we are recognising the state of Palestine at some stage in coming days is to keep alive that idea of a two-state solution. It's a much maligned idea. People say it's just an empty slogan because people have been talking about it for years. There have been occasions in the past where the Palestinians themselves have refused a deal for a two-state solution that was on the table that some of them now regret not taking. But that is why the British and the French and others are going down this route. Plus one other thing, domestic internal pressure. The Keir Starmer is under a huge amount of pressure from his own MPs and others to be seen to be doing something to push back at the Israelis over their military operation in Gaza that's taking place. And so Palestinian statehood, the support thereof, has become a symbol of that. And that's why, you know, petitions, votes in Parliament.
But a brief thought on where you finished there. There was nothing, was there, from the American president that gave you any sort of sense that he would intervene to stop that new, renewed military offensive that we've already seen over the last few days in Gaza City, with all of the consequences that Keir Starmer alluded to?
Whenever, throughout this, ever since October the 7th, whenever this sort of pressure has been put on the Americans, you know, when are you going to do something? What you tend to get from President Trump is, I want to let the Israelis get this over and done with, and that he sort of senses that it's like a conflict that needs to burn itself out and for the fighting to be complete. And while he does that, the Israeli government carries on the fighting that with all the consequences that we see every day.
James Nomier, stay with me. I'll be returning to you in a moment or two as we see the live pictures still from Windsor. But if you are just joining us here on BBC News, it's a little after 4:30. It's a good moment to just pause and reflect on what we heard in that news conference. It lasted about 45 minutes. No fireworks. Most of the bear traps and pitfalls that perhaps had been predicted were avoided. And that really marks the end of the big set pieces in front of the camera before Donald Trump eventually heads back to Washington. All of that will play out in the next hour and a half or so. But if you're just joining us, you missed the news conference, let's just recap. And of course, the two leaders, they started by talking a lot and celebrating the relationship between the two countries, the US and UK. Here's a little of what they had to say.
This historic second state visit is a moment to celebrate the unique bond between our two countries. But today we've gone far beyond that We've renewed the special relationship for a new era. The United Kingdom and the United States stand together today as first partners on defence, first partners in trade, with the groundbreaking deal we struck in May, and now with the new agreement that we've just signed this afternoon. We're confirming our status as the first partners in science and technology, ready to define this century together, just as we did the last.
This enduring connection is why I was thrilled that the United Kingdom was the very first country with which we made a historic trade deal, and a very good trade deal. He's a tough negotiator. I think it was a better deal for you than us, but these are minor details.
It's a very good deal for both of us.
He is a great negotiator who will extend our unparalleled security alliance into the realm of economic security for the first time, and I look forward to finalizing it very soon. We'll have it done very quickly. We have also just signed a historic technology prosperity deal, one of a kind, to ensure our country's lead.
Well, Donald Trump went on to claim the US has solved 7 wars that were unsolvable and couldn't be negotiated since taking office, and he specifically returned to Vladimir Putin.
So far, so good. What a historic moment for both our countries, of course. And then I was there the first time around, and got to go to Buckingham Palace and see so much of the pomp and circumstance, the pageantry around the visit. The relationships between our two countries were extremely strong then. They're even stronger now. I feel on the global stage, America is now more feared, more loved, and respected than they were under Joe Biden. The relationship, the bond between the king and the president look really good as well. Not to mention the fact, working through some of the actual things they have to do as leaders of their countries, what with the trade deals, for example, looking to talk about safety on the global stage too, the military responses to various things around the world. It looks like a really good relationship, a good partnership that has been that way for a long time, continues to this day. The visit, I think, only goes to strengthen that.
Let me take it in stages, because you mentioned in terms of the successes, you talked and referenced trade. What is in what has been agreed in these announcements in it for the US?
Well, again, I think so many politicians I've worked for in the past always talk about free and fair trade. You hear that term thrown around consistently. The free trade's always there. The fair trade is what never follows. And I think Donald Trump's, with so many things in this administration, this second time around, even the first time, it's about common sense for the American people and why his message and his policies really resonate. You don't think men should be in women's sports? That's common sense. You think you should have a southern border that's closed to prevent illegals from coming in and taking away your health care, all of your education spots, your first responders, taxing them as well. That's commonsensical for a lot of folks. The same thing applies with the tariffs and the trade. There, in no way, shape, form, or fashion should it be that America has to pay exorbitant tariffs where other countries don't have to do so. And you heard Keir Starmer this morning, as well as Donald Trump, talking about the partnership and the relationship they've developed under the banner of trade to make things more balanced. It's a world reshaping, no question about that. But Donald Trump has been talking about things like tariffs and talking about things like trade back in the 80s. If you go back and look at
he's
him
talked
on,
about
like,
it for a long
Show,
time, and different people, certainly in that first administration, dissuaded him from actually doing it, pointing to the fact that on so many occasions tariffs end up being paid even now. But in terms of this special relationship and actually it delivering tangible results, here in the UK there was a lot of hope that perhaps those steel tariffs could be negotiated down even to zero. That hasn't happened, and that will disappoint a lot of people, certainly in that sector here in this country.
Most assuredly. But again, Donald Trump, and I've been in these rooms with President Xi of China, Vladimir Putin, the aforementioned, Abe of Japan, so many I've watched Donald Trump negotiate deals with them, and their faces are quite stunned when they realize the American president isn't just going to roll over and take whatever deals on the table. He wants to make sure the American people, American industries, American workers, American manufacturing is always protected first. And so he was elected win on something and then implement the very thing that got them elected. But Donald Trump is doing that. And while a lot of people do want tariffs to come down, it seems as though right now Donald Trump is stuck on the position and will be that way, because he did put tariffs on China in the first administration too. He likes the reordering and the resetting of the table internationally on trade, and he's going to keep that posture because that's what the American people voted for.
Hogan, before I ask you the next question, I just want to pause for a moment, because as you're talking to me, we're seeing the live pictures from Windsor. The news conference clearly has finished a while ago, but we're seeing, at Chequers. And let me just put those pictures full screen, because we're seeing the honour guard all there ready for some of the departures. So we will continue to watch those live pictures. And it was so interesting listening to the two leaders in the news conference, because you talk about tangible successes when it comes to those big international issues. Ukraine, let's start with that. Did you think there'd been much progress in terms of what the president said in terms of his approach?
Well, foreign policy is extremely difficult and extremely nuanced. Donald Trump has good relationships with both leaders. But of course, we expected, as Donald Trump said there, this to go much quicker because he thought that would win the day and he could get both sides to the table. However, he inherited this war. This was something Joe Biden, as you know.
Sure, but he's had long enough now to, sorry to cut across you, but he's had long enough to see how Vladimir Putin has responded and changed tactics. Do you get any sort of sense from what you heard from the president just now that maybe listening to Keir Starmer, maybe listening to what King Charles said in the state banquet yesterday, where he specifically referenced support to Ukraine, that there's any detailed change in the president's approach that might be coming?
Well, he wants the war to end. He wants the bloodshed to stop. He wants the killing to cease. And so whatever avenue that takes, he's going to find a way to make that happen. He inherited this war. He's going to have to fix it. He knows that. And he's taken a lot of avenues. As he said before, he wanted Vladimir Putin wanted to meet, and then Zelensky didn't. Zelensky wanted to meet, then Putin didn't. He's in this little cycle, and he's the only one working to broker a deal to stop this, because the Lord knows the first administration didn't pay much attention to it. So he's got it on his radar. He knows how to fix it. He's just got to get both sides of the table to get it done.
Do you expect at any stage in the next few weeks, even months, that you will hear very direct criticism of Vladimir Putin, saying, you started this war, it is for you to stop the attacks, to bring it to a close, that sort of language that we've certainly heard from the Europeans?
Well, he said things to that effect as well. Donald Trump understands the global stage better than most. It's why he didn't have any wars break out under his first administration, and none this time either. He's the one who stops wars, even bringing peace to the Middle East. Again, I remind you, this started under Joe Biden's administration. Now he's got to clean up the mess that they left for him. He's doing everything he can to make this happen. Lord knows he wants the killing to stop. It will. It's just going to take some time, as these two leaders are pretty intransigent, stuck into where they want to be right now. So he's going to have to break the logjam and broker some type of deal.
But in a sense,
pretty confident he can do it.
In a sense, you've just repeated perhaps the approach that Donald Trump has been criticised for, which is absolutely almost balancing out the blame. You talk about both leaders being intransigent. This is a war that was started by Vladimir Putin invading. This is a war that continues by Vladimir Putin continuing to bomb. Well,
not to mention the fact, though, you'll recall it was Zelensky who came to America and tried to lecture our president in the Oval Office and got excoriated for doing just that, because after all, we're the ones funding all of this. Not to mention the fact that Donald Trump in the first administration gave offensive weapons to the Ukrainians when Barack Obama and Joe Biden would not. They refused to do so. The reason Ukraine wasn't obliterated in the first place was because of the weaponry Donald Trump gave them. However, as president of the United States, present day, he has to work with both sides to get a deal done. You can't make it one-sided either way. He understands the complexities that exist. He understands both leaders. He'll get the job done.
Let me turn to Gaza, because the same dynamic is at play. Did you get any sense of any different sort of strategy as a result of this meeting here at Chequers with Keir Starmer? Because, again, a difference of emphasis, certainly, and also approach on Gaza and the conflict.
I did not see the comments that you're actually referencing here. I've seen no shift, though, in posture or political messaging from the White House on this very topic. He understands what's going on here as well. And I'll remind you again, it was Donald Trump who had the Abraham Accords, who brought peace to that region the first time around. He's working to do so now as well. But make no mistake, October 7th, the anniversary is coming up. This is fresh on a lot of people's minds. And when you continue to lob missiles into one side, you continue to try and profiteer off of death. Donald Trump's going to work to stop that, whether you're talking about the American citizens here at home or our partners and allies abroad.
But you don't see him intervening in the coming weeks with this renewed military offensive that certainly the British in the last few days have described as being reckless, will only bring more bloodshed, kill more Palestinian civilians. You don't think in the coming days and weeks Donald Trump will say to Benjamin Netanyahu, it is time to stop this?
Well, again, he has taken the posture as the president that Netanyahu has a right to defend himself. He is in a great relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu as well. But I'm not going to get ahead of the president. I'm not in the White House now. I don't know all the things they know. But the fact is, he's been working with folks in that region to bring a calm and a cessation to this war. But it's pretty clear that Israel has decided they aren't going to take this anymore. And many of their actions, not all, but many of their actions have been supported by this administration. I would imagine that continues.
Let me ask you a final question about free speech, because you may or may not have heard, I don't know if you saw the full news conference just now, but in terms of the Jimmy Kimmel show being pulled, what is your thought on what is actually happening in the United States? Because Donald Trump talked about bad ratings, but he's been in his sights, Jimmy Kimmel, after Stephen Colbert only a few weeks ago. We've seen different actions from the administration, the authorities after Charlie Kirk's death, with suggestions that employers might want to actually talk to people who have put up negative comments. What is happening in the US around that very basic issue of free speech?
Well, first things first, the only person who had their free speech rights threatened were those of Charlie Kirk. He was literally murdered, shot through the neck by an assassin because he didn't like the fact that Charlie Kirk had differences of opinions as the shooter did. It has time and time again been proven that it was the previous administration, the Democrat Party, working in colleague with the social media, with all of the major news outlets to silence, censor, and shadow ban Americans, whether it be about the Hunter Biden laptop, COVID numbers, Russia collusion, and the like. They continue to do that to try and hurt conservative voices. They have always been against free speech because they don't like it when someone disagrees with their narrative. So moving forward,
I've just got to cut across you.
If you're a private entity, you can in fact fire somebody for cause.
Listen, I've got to cut across you, and apologies for that, but we're seeing the pictures there at Chequers for the departure of President Trump, with the pipers already playing. Let's put the sound up. Well, there as the motorcade goes through the gates the pipers playing, and we saw a lot of that through the marching bands yesterday. And at the start of that news conference, Donald Trump talking about the magnificence of what he witnessed around this time yesterday on the East Lawns there at Windsor. So he has very much enjoyed everything over the last couple of days, first at Windsor and now as he departs Chequers. And you see just a very short journey to Marine One, and we will see the President just get into the helicopters, and we've seen that over the skies of London over the last couple of days. A wave, and it has been, we were talking about this only yesterday, a jam-packed agenda, and at the President's age, the King's age, it was a lot to pack in all of the events of yesterday, and that moved really quickly today for Donald Trump into the politics of today. It started with talking about trade and business, the earlier news conference, and then that joint news conference with Keir Starmer. And there you see First Lady and the President get on board Marine One, and those rotor blades will fire up in the next little while. Nomia Iqbal is still here in the studio with me, and right across the board with all our correspondents, all our contributors. This trip being viewed as a real success.
It really has been, and when I flew over with the President on Air Force One, it was very clear from his mood, from his demeanour, that he wanted this to be a positive trip. I mean, he's the only president that's ever had a second state visit in this way. Donald Trump has this very unique relationship in the sense that the royal family is the only group of people, I would say, that he genuinely has this respect and unwavering admiration for. So he was right from the beginning wanting this trip to go well. We saw in that press conference, as we were saying earlier, there were opportunities for some pitfalls. I think they swerved it pretty well. Both men like each other very much. Donald Trump has said that in the past, despite the fact they are politically and personally very, very different characters, but they seem to get on very well. And I think both sides will see this as a success. I mean, before I left yesterday, when I was speaking to the team from the White House, they loved the royal visit. They loved the trip. They spoke about it in very glowing terms in terms of how it's all going.
It's interesting how you describe the relationship, because in the lead up to this visit, a number of people who I talked to made the point that Donald Trump loves numbers. So we've seen that in just about everything that he said through the course of the various news conferences, but loves numbers. Will have looked at Keir Starmer when he was elected, the landslide, thought that was impressive, warmed to him. And of course, recently, politically, the UK Prime Minister has had quite a lot of difficulties, and there had been a thought that perhaps Donald Trump might view him and treat him rather differently, might reflect on that in any of the news conferences, all those other pitfalls that potentially the US President could have alluded to. We saw none of that. None
of it. And here's the thing with President Trump, as we know, he's very mercurial, and he has shown that he can turn against allies. I mean, if you look at his approach to Canada, Mexico, big trading partners when it comes to tariffs. I did find it interesting the way President Trump in the conference was praising the Prime Minister as a tough negotiator. And Donald Trump's very clever at doing that. It suggests that the trade deal was not an easy deal to negotiate, and it might have come out better for the UK. And I know that, you know, there is still some there's not a general consensus that the UK it will come out great. There is still concerns about tariffs on British exports still being higher than before Trump became president for the second time. I digress. But on your point, there were these opportunities for some pitfalls. Lord Mandelson, for example, Sir Keir Starmer had fired him. Mr. Mandelson was seen as the UK's guy in Washington, not far from where I live, actually, Matthew, in Washington, D.C. There is a restaurant where you see a lot of the MAGA types, and Lord Mandelson was often in that bar. He was seen as the person that could really connect with the Trump administration, and I think it would be a blow to them that he's gone, but we didn't hear any of that.
When you mentioned that, I actually have the words on the screen in front of me from that news conference, because he said as a short sentence, I don't know him, when he was asked in that press conference. It reminded me of at the stage where Prince Andrew was engulfed in headlines in the same way around Epstein. He almost used a similar phrase about not knowing him well. So it is one of the techniques he clearly uses to sidestep areas potentially that has danger.
And yeah, and people, I mean, the natural follow-up would be, well, there are plenty of pictures, plenty of footage of you meeting him in the Oval Office. Lord Mandelson, you know, was seen as, I say, the guy that the UK government could use in the US to get close to Trump. So when Mr. Trump says, I don't know him, and yeah, it's a deflection. And then he actually moved the question on to Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Keir Starmer just sort of briefly shut it down, didn't he?
We'll pause because there it is, Marine One, just taking off. And as I say, this more or less what we've seen in the last hour and a half, the last set piece of this second state visit. Nomia, as we look at those pictures, it's worth just a thought for all of those people at Windsor, all of those people at Chequers and at Whitehall, because you made the point that you were there at the White House when the letter was handed over by Keir Starmer to the President inviting him for this visit. It is the most monumental amount of work, of choreography, of detail. And the fact that this trip has gone so smoothly, it seems, it is a real success for all of those planners, the people that you probably don't see any of it in front of the camera.
We saw some of them when we were at Windsor Castle, and they were very, like, they had been working hard for a long time. Even the table at the banquet, we were brought inside to see it beforehand. That took a good month, and there were 100 staff on hand to serve during the banquet dinner. So much work has gone into this, and so I think for certainly the staff there, people that we spoke to, very kind, very helpful, very welcoming. Yes, this would be seen as a huge success, given that nothing too controversial happened.
We'll talk about more of the detail in a moment or two, but it's interesting because you have clearly all of the optics that I know they saw a lot of in America on their screens, and Donald Trump loving every part of that. But as we've reflected since the news conference end on the really big issues at hand, do you get a sense of very much movement on any of those issues?
Not really. So Gaza obviously was one of the big issues that came up. We know that the UK wants to recognise Palestinian statehood. It's not something that Donald Trump agrees with, which he said. It was interesting. They said they had spent an hour beforehand talking about it. I think also what struck me was the way Donald Trump didn't really talk very much about the current situation on the ground in Gaza in terms of the hunger we're seeing, the starvation, the number of Palestinians killed in the war. He avoided any mention of that. And he sort of respectfully, politely said he didn't agree with Sir Keir Starmer. So you don't feel there's any movement on that. With Ukraine, it was interesting. Sir Keir Starmer didn't pull any punches. He made it quite clear how he felt about Vladimir Putin, said that he showed his true colours. And Mr. Trump said that he was let down by him, something that he said before. But the big question has always been with the Trump administration, what are you going to do about it? The Trump administration has hugely sanctioned Russia in the past. There's a debate over whether more sanctions would make any difference. But we didn't get any sort of new line from Mr. Trump or certainly from Mr. Starmer in terms of how that moves forward. It was all just very pleasant, I would say.
Nomia, stay with me, and thank you for being with me for the last hour and taking me through all of that. The live picture you are seeing on the screen is of Air Force One. Normally we get a different angle of that, but we saw Marine One take off a short while ago. There is Air Force One already parked up to take the president back to Washington. The conclusion of the state visit, the historic second state visit that has so impressed Donald Trump. As we continue to watch the live pictures, perhaps the president will speak again when he gets off Marine One just before getting onto Air Force One. Do stay with us because we have extensive coverage here in the next 60 minutes. You are watching BBC News. Well, welcome to BBC News. If you're just joining us, it is 5 o'clock. You are looking at live pictures of Air Force One because the state visit is about to come to a conclusion. Donald Trump on his way to Air Force One to depart back for Washington. He is currently in the air. So let's just reflect where we are after another really busy 24 hours, let alone the last 48 hours. President Trump and Keir Starmer, well, they have hailed relations between their two countries at the end of Donald Trump's second state visit to the UK. Donald and Melania Trump left Chequers just a few minutes ago, saying goodbye to Keir Starmer and his wife Victoria. The bagpipes played again, as we just saw, as they left the Prime Minister's official country residence and then departed on Marine One. Well, before leaving, the two leaders held a news conference in which, unsurprisingly, foreign policy dominated, with Donald Trump saying Vladimir Putin had really let him down over the war in Ukraine. When asked about Keir Starmer's plan to recognise a Palestinian state, Donald Trump said he had a disagreement with the Prime Minister on that score. On the domestic front, President Trump suggested Keir Starmer could use the military to control the UK's borders. And during the president's historic second state visit, Donald Trump was honoured with pomp and pageantry, including a state banquet hosted by the King and Queen at Windsor Castle. Throughout the programme, we'll examine the deals that have been signed. We'll look in more detail of the politics and the diplomacy from the last few days. But first, let's listen to some of what the two men had to say in the last hour.
This historic second state visit is a moment to celebrate the unique bond between our two countries. But today we've gone far beyond that. We've renewed the special relationship for a new era. The United Kingdom and the United States stand together today as first partners on defence, first partners in trade with the groundbreaking deal we struck in May, and now with the new agreement that we've just signed this afternoon. We're confirming our status as the first partners in science and technology, ready to define this century together, just as we did the last.
That was very important, drill, baby, drill. And you have a great asset here, and we spoke about it. It's called the North Sea. The North Sea oil is phenomenal. And I hope, because I love this country, you know, my mother was born in Scotland, and the Hebrides, Stornoway, that's Syria, Scotland. We were talking about it. I'm very honored to tell you that we've solved 7 wars, wars that were unsolvable, wars that couldn't be negotiated or done. The U.S. has done 7 of them. The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but he's let me down. He's really let me down. It was going to be Russia and Ukraine, but we'll see how that turns out.
We absolutely agree on the need for peace and a roadmap, because the situation in Gaza is intolerable. The hostages have been held for a very, very long time, and they must be freed. And we need aid to get into Gaza at speed. And so it's within that context of a plan for peace, which we're working hard on, which not only did we discuss this morning, but our two teams have been working together on, that the question of recognition needs to be seen. And so it's part of that overall package which hopefully takes us from the appalling situation we're in now to the outcome of a safe and secure Israel, which we do not have, and a viable Palestinian state. Thank you.
Well, simply, I want the hostages released now, right now, not 1, 2, we'll give you 3 more tomorrow, and, you know, like it's been, but we're the ones that got all the hostages released. We got many, many came to the Oval Office, and I've heard stories like I've never thought even possible. There was no humanity, no anything. I said to them, I said, was there any warmth shown during this stay, like they offered you a little extra meal, they gave you a little smile, and they said, don't worry, you'll be okay. And every one of them said, not even a little bit. Amazing, you know, to think that during this stay, long stay in some cases. We had a man the other day, 451 days he was there. I always ask that question. And was there any warmth shown, just a little word of, you know, encouragement? And the answer is every time, absolutely not. I'm shocked to hear it, because in the worst cases, there's always somebody that comes through. We have to remember October 7th, one of the worst, most violent days in the history of the world, not just there, the history of the world. And I got to see the tapes, and I wish I didn't see them, actually, but I got to see them. And I want an end. I want the hostages released, and I think it's going to be okay, but it has been a brutal period of time. But this has been going on for a long time. This is not something that's over the last year, 2 years, but this has been for decades and decades. But we want it to end. We have to have the hostages back immediately. That's what the people of Israel want. They want them back. And we want the fighting to stop, and it's going to stop. But a lot of bad things. You know, Hamas said that they're going to put the hostages up as bait. They're going to put the hostages in front of any attack. And that's pretty brutal. We haven't heard that one in a long time. So we have to remember that. So I have a disagreement with the Prime Minister on that score. Okay?
Let me be really clear about Hamas. They're a terrorist organisation who can have no part in any future governance in Palestine. And what happened on October the 7th was the worst attack since the Holocaust. We have extended family in Israel. I understand firsthand the psychological impact that that had across Israel. So I know exactly where I stand in relation to Hamas. Hamas, of course, don't want a two-state solution. They don't want peace. They don't want a ceasefire. So I'm very clear where I stand on Hamas. Okay. On the question of recognition, I made my position clear at the end of July as to the timing, which has got nothing to do with this state visit, and I've discussed it with the President, as you would expect amongst two leaders who respect each other and like each other and want to bring about...
Lord Mandelson, he is no longer the ambassador. Do you have some sympathy with him that he lost his job over historic links to Jeffrey Epstein? Thank you very much, sir.
I don't know him, actually. I had heard that, and I think maybe the Prime Minister would be better speaking of that. That was a choice that he made, and I don't know. What is your answer to that?
Well, I mean, it's very straightforward. Some information came to light last week which wasn't available when he was appointed, and I made a decision about that.
Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you know, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
Well, they're just some of the key planks from a news conference that lasted 45 minutes. I just want to show you the pictures from Stansted, because there is Air Force One ready to take the US President back to Washington, and that is very good timing, because just as I was looking at those pictures, the camera moving, so we're keeping an eye on Marine One, because we saw that depart from Chequers only a couple of moments ago, and well, we're keeping an eye on these live pictures next to Air Force One, because in the next little while we will see the President. We don't know if he will get straight on board or actually have a last few parting words. That is often the way with this President. But let's head back to Chequers and our Chief North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue, who's been here throughout the course of the last 2 days, was watching everything in that news conference. I'll come to that in a moment or two, Gary, but it has been Such an extraordinary last 48 hours when you think of some of the optics that we have seen, some of these events at Windsor, and just about everyone agreeing that as a state visit, this has really been a success.
I think that's right. I mean, I think, you know, if you want to point to any kind of solutions that the two men have come up to the problems facing the world, probably not so much, because I don't think we've heard anything new about things like the conflict in Ukraine or how to end the war in Gaza. So in that sense, you know, yeah, no change. Yes, of course, there have been huge announcements about economic cooperation, about inward investment into the UK and vice versa into the US, and various deals like that. Much of that, of course, is promised over some period of time, these tens of billions, 150 billion, 200, whatever kind of number you pick. Much of that, you know, will take time to appear, and some of it may not appear. If you look at the sort of jobs that they're talking about creating, the numbers are quite low. I mean, 15,000 jobs, that's incredibly important, every single one of those to someone who gets one of those jobs. But that isn't the hundreds of thousands of jobs that, you know, you would expect from large amounts of investment. These are low labour intensive industries that we're talking about, but they can create economic growth, and this is all ifs and buts, and it's all about the future. And I think on the sort of wider thing about strengthening the special relationship, yeah, the British government will definitely think that has been achieved. The warm words from the President seemed genuine, didn't they? He seemed to be particularly taken with Windsor as well, and the sort of special nature of that. And that really isn't something that other countries can kind of put on in the same way as they can in Britain. Other countries don't really have that kind of sort of infrastructure, constitutional monarchy, if you want to call it. Even those that do, don't really have that kind of the glamour that you get with the royal family in this country. So I think in those sorts of areas that there will be considerable success. And of course, Keir Starmer has managed to tread this path with the President right back since February until now of carrying on maintaining some disagreements on some key issues, but working out how to manage those disagreements so they don't flare up into big, ugly moments that can dominate the agenda and spoil a relationship.
I'll come back to some of those international issues in a moment. I'll also come back to perhaps what the UK wanted out of a trip like this. But in terms of what Donald Trump wanted out of it, perhaps you get a real sense and a real clue in terms of the phrase he has repeatedly used, which is that it's unprecedented to be given an honour for a second state visit. He even said, didn't he, last night, that he hoped it wouldn't be repeated, it wouldn't be extended to anybody else.
Yeah. He definitely wants to occupy that plinth, doesn't he? Absolutely. And I think it goes back to, you know, his first term in office where, you know, there was a real debate, wasn't there, about whether the president was, how do we put it, was he an aberration? Was he some, you know, a one-term president that wasn't really a change in America? Well, he won a second term this time around, and that does fix his place in history. It fixes him as a hugely significant figure in 21st century US and world politics. And this